Hey, we are going to be working on the Skill 1 assignment for our flat pattern development class. We're going to be doing 5 activities together. Meet me over at the overhead camera and we'll start with activity number 1. We're going to be squaring lines, working on squaring lines. A few of the tools you might want is an L-square ruler, a clear gridded ruler, a pencil. I'm going to be using a black pen just so that it shows up on the screen, the camera, but you should be using a pencil, and then you'll probably want your awl. So here's the sheet, and pretty much it just tells us to draw a line down the center of our paper. So whenever we're using our rulers, you really want to make sure that you get your head down over. We're not really measuring anything, but if you're looking at it from back off of like a distance, just know that you're not really seeing accuracy. So I need your head to be down over the top of the ruler whenever you're using it, just for precision. Also, whenever you are using a ruler, you can't have one point of contact, or as you are drawing a line down the edge of it, it will pivot. So you really need to get your ruler lined up wherever it needs to be. Create 2 points of contact. I like to use kind of like my thumb and my pointer finger, or my thumb and my middle finger, and just really hold it down in 2 different spots firmly so that when you draw a line along the edge of it, it does not shift, okay? So to start off this activity, I'm going to use my clear gridded ruler and just draw a line down the center of the paper. It does not have to be exact, but remember, make 2 points of contact and get it right along the edge. Should look very straight when you're done. Now, here's what we're going to do. We are going to square 2 lines off of this. I need your squared lines to be perpendicular. That means they create exactly a 90-degree angle. One way we can do this is, do you see these small red lines on our ruler? I'm going to zoom you in here. All right, we can line up one of these small red lines on our ruler with the line we just created. And the way you need to do this is to really get your head over the top of the ruler. Okay, once you have that, create your 2 points of contact and draw your line along the edge, and then anywhere along that line, just create a second squared line. So again, I'm going to get my head down on top of the ruler, really make sure it's squared up, and draw a line. Okay, center line, and I have my 2 squared off lines. Another way that you could create a squared off line is to use your L-square ruler. I'm going to zoom this out. This is a little bit overkill for this assignment, but I just want you to know that you can use this. Now, these rulers are definitely a 90-degree angle. So if you were to go and line up one edge of your ruler with your center line, really make sure it's lined up, and then draw a line along this edge. This line would also be squared off. If you wanted to go do it on the other side, you just have to flip your ruler. So there's those two different ways that you can create a squared line, just so you know. I really prefer this one for this skill. So now what we're going to do is we're going to check our accuracy of, did we actually square these lines off correctly? So the way that you're going to do that is you are going to pinch your paper along your center line, and you're going to crease your paper. Now I want this to be precise, okay? I want you to get your crease exactly on that center line. All right, so when you look at your paper, you shouldn't be able to see pencil mark on either side. You should just see it right along the edge of your crease, okay? Now, here's what you're gonna do. You are gonna take your awl and you are going to poke it. You're gonna kind of come out here and you're gonna poke it right through your paper on that line. And this is while your paper is folded, okay? And do it on both of those lines. And come out a little ways, poke it through. Now, when you unfold, those holes on the other side should be right on your line. Here, let me zoom in and see if, whoop. Okay. So do you see my awl hole right here? It's right on my line. When my paper was folded, it went through right on my other line. That means this line is definitely squared off from my center line. Now, if it's like a tiny, tiny, tiny bit off, you're okay. But if it's not even touching the line, if it's like an eighth or a quarter of an inch off, you need to re-square your line. So that's how you can always tell if you've gotten it definitely squared, okay? Another way to check if something is squared off, like say you have one line that's definitely squared off, you can measure the distance from here to here on this side, and then go way over here to this side, and check and make sure that you have that same measurement. Okay? Now the last step for you is you are going to measure between your two squared off lines. Once you make sure they're definitely squared, you're gonna measure between the two squared off lines and record that on the bottom of your assignment sheet. All right, we're gonna need our activity pages and a French curve, and you'll want a pencil. Again, I'm using a black pen just so you can see it on the camera. All right, so here's what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna be learning how to use our curves. There are a lot of different curves that we will utilize in this class. Here's some other examples. But for now, we are going to practice with our French curve. I prefer the clear acrylic curves just because you can see through them to make sure you're lining things up accurately. A French curve is a very intentional shape for fashion. You'll recognize that you're able to utilize it for the exact shaping of armholes, necklines, crotch curves. A lot of different areas on the body will flow smoothly with this curve. Okay, so I have kind of created the mimicking what will be the drafting for our front and back bodices. And we're just gonna practice filling in the armhole curves with our French curve. So you'll see that each of these has a shoulder seam, a side seam, and a guideline of some sort. Shoulder seam, side seam, and a guideline. So what I want you to do is start with the front bodice, and our ultimate goal is we want to connect G to O, and we want our curve, our armhole curve, to hit somewhere along this guideline, anywhere along it, as we're connecting G to O. We're going to utilize our French curve, and we are going to slide her in right here. Now, French curves are something you really need to play around with and make sure you really like where they're sitting before you hold them down and then trace around them. I am gonna zoom in so you can see a little bit better. Here we go. Okay. So again, we're trying to connect G to O, and as we curve our line from G to O, we want it to hit, just brush against this guideline somewhere along that guideline, okay? So you're gonna take your French curve, and with the flatter part of it kind of facing up, you are gonna glide it right in here. Now you'll notice that at G and at O, we have these little L's in the corner, and that just means that we want to create a bit of a 90-degree angle here, okay? We want there to be just a ½ inch or so of a 90-degree angle right around these corners before we go into our curve. So what you're gonna do is slide this right in here and just play around with it until this flatter part is kind of coming up into G. This edge, this curved edge of the French curve is hitting somewhere along the guideline, and the bottom of the curve here is coming into this 90-degree angle down here. Okay. So I really am happy with how this is sitting. So I'm going to again create 2 points of contact on my French curve so it doesn't move around on me, and then I'm just gonna in one fell swoop kind of trace around it, okay? Whoop, I moved it. All right. I love that. All right, I'm happy with that. I'm gonna move on to the back armhole. Again, we're gonna do the same thing. We are trying to connect H to N down here. And as we curve around, we want our French curve to hit somewhere along this guideline. So from the front armhole over here, we're gonna have to just flip our French curve over. So again, we're just gonna play around with it. Sometimes you can twist it and rotate it, and sometimes you can move it in and out, up and down, but you kind of wanna get it in place and then just kind of play around with it a little bit. And again, we have these 90-degree angles here at H and N, and my goal is not for you to connect right here at the end of that guideline. I just put those there. We just need a little bit of a 90-degree angle. So even right here, where my curve is kind of coming into this squared off line, I'm only gonna have about a 1/4 inch of squared off from side seam, and that is totally, I'm fine with that. I like where this curve is sitting, so I am going to hold it down with at least 2 points of contact. Actually, I'm gonna scoot it back a little bit. And then I'm gonna draw in my curve. And you can go like past, if you want with your rulers, but look at how smooth and clean that is. We love that. Now, the next step for this activity is we're gonna work on measuring our curves. So here are a few different options. So we have our clear gridded ruler. I have this Variform curve. It's kind of the same shape as the French curve. It just has a ruler on it. We also have our flexi curve, which is very flexible and you can flex it into any shape. And I have a measuring tape like this. So I'll show you all the different ways you can measure your curves. I want you to try at least 2 different ways. And measure your curve a few times. This is the whole, we're gonna really put into practice measure twice, cut once, you know, sort of thing. But measure twice, record once, measure twice, draft a line once. That's gonna be a constant in this course where we're measuring multiple times just to check our own accuracy and make sure we're being really precise, okay? So the first way I'm gonna show you to measure might be the easiest, and that's using this Variform curve ruler. Since it's the same shape as the French curve, you can literally just put it up and measure this line. So you'll notice that the 0 is up here. So you could kind of give yourself tick marks and say, okay, from here to here, it is 6 3/4. And then you can just measure from here to here and add that together, okay? That's one way. Another way is walking your ruler, or you can bend this ruler along it. This is actually pretty difficult if it's a tight curve. Sometimes if you can get it bent right along there, really accurately, you can get a good measurement, okay? The next way is to use this flexible ruler. This is super handy. And since we made our curves utilizing our French curve, one thing you can do is use your French curve to help shape this ruler. So you get it in the exact shape of the curve. So there we go, utilize your French curve and then zero it out and make sure the edge of the ruler goes right on your line. We are measuring that exact line we drew in earlier. Okay? That is another way that you can measure. And then the last way that I want you to try measuring is using a measuring tape like this. And you hold it up on its edge and you have to go really slow and be really accurate with this, but you just sort of walk it along the curve. Well, I should probably do this. Should probably start with my measurements down. And you sort of walk the edge of it all along your line. Okay, one more way that you can do it is to walk your ruler. So you're gonna zero your ruler out up here, like a G or something. And I'm gonna use my awl. You find where, this is called walking, and this will be kind of our next activity, but you can always try it here. So you're gonna zero your ruler out at one edge. You're gonna find where these two lines are lined up and then where they start to converge. Right where they start to converge, you're gonna put your awl down right on the edge of the ruler to make kind of like a pivot point, okay? Right on the edge. And then you're gonna pivot your ruler to close the gap, all right? So you're walking the edge of the ruler along the curve. Right where the two lines start to converge, I create a pivot point, and I pivot that gap closed. And then again, right where they converge, create a pivot and close that up. and I do this all along the curve. And you have to be very, very accurate. You can also use your finger to create the pivot point. You just want to make sure that you are pivoting, your pivot point is right on the edge of the ruler. Do not put your finger in here and create a pivot point, or you are losing accuracy, okay? You want to pivot all along the edge. Until you get to the very end, and then record your measurement. So try that activity, practice drawing in your curves, practice measuring one of these curves. Try it a few different ways, see what works best for you, and then record your measurement on the assignment sheet. We are going to be practicing the idea of walking. Now, you might have done this on the last activity if you were walking your ruler along the armhole curve here. We're going to be utilizing our half scales, and you need at least one of your front bodices. I don't care which one, I'm going to use this one. You need your back bodice and you need your sleeve. You will also need a ruler, okay? Okay, so the intention is when you're sewing these together, the front and back bodices get sewn together at the side seams and then also at the shoulder seams. The sleeve gets sewn together along this underarm seam, and then it will get inset into the bodice. We have a one notch here and a double notch over here. The single notch means this side of the sleeve cap gets sewn to the front bodice, and this side of the sleeve cap gets sewn to the back bodice. Typically a single notch will indicate the front of something, so in this case the front of the sleeve, and a double notch will indicate the back side of something, in this case the back side of the sleeve. So we want to walk this sleeve cap on the front and the back bodice, and what I'm going to have you do is, the way that we draft our sleeve is that we build a little bit of ease into this sleeve cap, which means that this measurement is a little bit longer than this measurement plus this measurement. And that means you're gonna have to do a little bit of easing up here between these notches when you sew it on. And that's just so that the sleeve cap can kind of like curl in around the ball of the shoulder and we'll get a really nice fit. So here's what I'm gonna have you do. You're gonna take your sleeve, and just like we would kind of sew them together, you're gonna flip it and put it right sides together on your front bodice. So I'm gonna zoom in so you can really see this. All right, so we have this corner right here between the sleeve cap and the underarm seam, and we have this corner on our front bodice between the armhole curve and the side seam. We want to line those two corners up, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to walk this sleeve cap all along until we get all the way up to the shoulder seam, okay? So again, I want you to line these corners up. And again, when you're walking, you are trying to find where the two edges converge with one another, where they're no longer in alignment. And I'm suggesting you use your awl and just kind of like, don't poke a hole in the paper, just kind of use the edge of it to create like a pivot point. So right here at the corner, they pretty much only line up at the corner. So I'm going to put my pivot point down, and I am just going to pivot my sleeve. I get them in really nice alignment here, and I stop pivoting. Now I'm going to come over here where, again, these two curves converge with one another, make my pivot point, pivot my pattern until they align, and then continue on. Now sometimes your pivot points have to be really close, and actually the closer they are, the better. So you'll see that I pivoted this lower part up, and my two notches are in alignment. The notch on my sleeve is in perfect alignment with the notch on my bodice. That means that I'm walking them well. So again, I'm going to continue up. And all you're doing is you're creating a pivot point. You're pivoting so that the curves line up, and then you're finding where they converge again and creating another pivot point. You're just walking these curves along one another. This is exactly where they will be sewn together. Our slopers do not have any seam allowance, so this is actually, the edge of the pattern piece is actually the stitch line. Okay, I have made it all the way up to my shoulder seam. I've walked the sleeve cap with the front armhole all the way up to the shoulder seam. So what I'm going to do is you can make a little mark right where that shoulder is. So you can see that I made a mark right where that shoulder lines up with the sleeve cap, okay? Or you could even use your awl and poke a little hole, okay? Now you're gonna set your front bodice off to the side and you're gonna get your back bodice. So now we need to do this edge of the sleeve cap with the back armhole. So again, I am going to flip it so they are right sides together. And we are taking this underarm seam sleeve cap corner, this corner right here, and we're gonna line it up with this corner along our side seam and armhole. Okay? Just get that corner lined up. Now these armholes are actually in pretty good alignment for about 3/8 of an inch. So I'm gonna set my first pivot point out here, right where they converge. I'll zoom in even more so you can see, okay? Right where the lines converge, I set my pivot point. I'm gonna pivot closed. And now this little section of my curves are in alignment. So I'm gonna advance forward, set my new pivot point, and keep going. Woo! Look, I made it up to my notches and they are in a perfect alignment. Thank goodness. That means you're walking correctly if yours are in really good alignment. Okay, I'm gonna continue all the way up until I get the sleeve cap completely walked with the back armhole all the way up to the shoulder seam. Okay, and again, I am going to poke a little hole or give myself a little mark right where my shoulder line is. Your mark should be a little bit more accurate than mine. I'm gonna redo that since it's really wide. There we go. All right, so now what I want you to do is I want you to measure. You should have on your where your single notches, you should have kind of a mark where the front shoulder line hit, kind of a mark where the back shoulder line hit. I want you to measure this distance between here. This is our sleeve cap ease. This is how much ease is built into our sleeve cap. So you can walk your ruler, you can measure it however you want, but take this measurement a few different times and make sure you're getting the same measurement, okay? And then you will record that on your assignment sheet. And what I want you to do after that is I want you to find the very center between these two marks, and you are going to put a single notch, okay? And what that single notch is gonna represent is where your shoulder seam will line up when you sew your sleeve into your bodice, okay? So I am going to find the center. I'm gonna measure this a few different times, make sure I'm getting the right measurement. Yep, got the same measurement as last time. 2, 3. I'm gonna give myself a mark right in the center of that ease. And I am going to notch my sleeve cap. There we go. So this is what your sleeve should look like when you're done. Should have a single notch to line up with the front bodice, a shoulder notch to line up with the shoulder seam, and then a double notch for the back. We are gonna be working on darts. We're gonna be working on filling in our dart legs, finding the edge shaping of our pattern piece at our dart intake. And here's what you're gonna need for this activity. You're gonna need your activity sheet, clear gridded ruler, some tape, a pencil. I'm using a pen so you can see it on the camera, and either scissors or tracing wheel. So to do this activity, our activity sheet tells us to fill in our darts along our skirt waist. These plus marks right here on our sheet are to mimic the dart points. So this whole, this is sort of to mimic the drafting for the skirt front. And these plus signs are the dart points. These hash marks along the waistline are the ends of our dart legs. This is kind of what it's gonna look like when we draft it, and this is how you go about filling in the dart legs. So clean up your surface. You really need just your pencil and a ruler. So to get really precise, accurate dart legs, we really want our dart legs to converge right at this plus mark right here. And the way that I like to do it is to use the power of the end of my pencil and the ruler. So what you're gonna do to fill in these dart legs is put your pencil lead right on the intersection of that plus mark. You are going to bring your clear gridded ruler right up alongside your pencil mark. So it's resting right on your pencil. And then line up your ruler with this one of the hash marks up at the waist. Fill in one of the dart legs, put your pencil back right on that intersection, and pivot your ruler over to the other hash mark and fill that in. Here's what we have. Now, feel free to go above and below these lines, but when you use your pencil lead right on that intersection and you bring the ruler up to it, you make sure that both of your dart legs are going to intersect right where you want them to, okay? So again, use the power of your pencil lead, put it right on that intersection where you want the dart leg to come to. Slide your ruler up to your pencil, pivot it so that it's in alignment with that hash mark up at the waist, draw in a dart leg. Get your pencil lead back on that intersection, pivot your ruler, draw in your other dart leg, okay? Again, I went above and below the lines. That's totally okay. But what you should be seeing is that your dart legs are intersecting right where you want them to, and that they are also in alignment with the hash marks you had at your waist. Now it's time for us to fold our darts. The standard default is that vertical darts, which these are vertical darts. This is our waistline, this is our hip line, this is center front and our side seam. We want our dart intake to be folded towards the center, okay, for vertical darts. So what I like to do is I like to put center front closest to me. I like to travel towards the and find the closest dart leg. I pinch that dart leg and crease my paper right on the dart leg, okay? Crease your paper all the way. What you want is you don't want to see pencil mark on either side. You just want it to be right on your crease, okay? Crease it really nice with your fingernails. Now unfold it. You should have a crease. You are going to take and crease it perpendicular to that right at your dart point, which was that little cross mark that we had, okay? Crease your paper all along there. Now you are going to take your dart leg that has a nice crease in it, use your fingernail to push the intake towards center front, and you are going to bring both of your dart legs, or bring that creased dart leg so it overlaps your other dart leg. Fold your dart. And I want you to tape above and below your waistline. Now you have folded your dart, which is, darts are how we turn two-dimensional drafting into kind of three-dimensional forms. So your paper is not going to lie flat any longer. It is now sort of a 3D shape. We're gonna do the same exact thing with our other dart leg. Center front is closest to us. We travel over to the dart leg closest to center front. We are going to crease right along that dart leg. Get a nice crease with your fingernails. Unfold and fold it back perpendicularly right at the dart point. Now keep it folded here. This is where you use your fingernail to push the dart intake towards the center and bring that creased dart leg to overlap the other one. I like starting near the dart point and working my way up to the end. And again, you're gonna tape above and below your waistline. Okay? Now we're getting this nice shaping here. We were able to bring in the circumference near the waist where our body is smaller, and then release that fabric out where our body is largest, near the hips, okay? So now that we've drawn in our dart legs and folded them, we need to find the edge shaping along this waist. Before we folded our darts, it was just kind of open at the dart intake. We didn't have an actual edge shaping for our pattern piece there. So that's what we're finding right now. There's two ways you can tell you you're gonna want a French curve for this part. As you'll notice on my waistline, when I folded this dart, my waist is in really great alignment. That is a nice smooth curve right there. But when I folded this dart, do you see how there's a little bit of a step? Like this side's a little bit lower, that side's a little bit higher, right here. I want this to be blended a little bit more smoothly. before I use my tracing wheel or cut along my waist edge. So I'm gonna take my French curve and I am just going to equalize this out. Try to find a middle ground, kind of bring the higher side down, raise the lower side up, and just kind of get a nice smooth blend here. So I'm gonna play around with my French curve until it's giving me a nice smooth edge, and then I'll fill that in. There we go. I'm happy with that. So now, once you've folded your darts and blended along this line, there's two ways you can go about finding the edge shaping here. You can use a tracing wheel or scissors. I'll show you the tracing wheel first, but essentially the idea is that this is nice and sharp and pokey. You roll this along the waistline and it will perforate your paper. So there'll be little holes and you will be able to fill in the edge shaping. And it's as simple as just walking it slowly along your newly blended waist edge. And you kind of want to be a little bit firm about it so that it will definitely poke holes in your paper. I don't love the tracing wheel because I'm actually not all that great at walking it. Here, let me zoom in. I'm actually not all that great at walking it right on my line. You'll see that my perforations go a little bit low here. So I think a better way to find the edge shaping is to use scissors. And while your darts are folded, you can just simply cut along this waist edge. Very carefully. Once we cut along it, we can go ahead and remove the tape. And you will see that there is a bit of shaping here. It is not just a smooth, straight across line. And what we're wanting, we want to have the darts folded when we cut along that line so that once we go to sew them, the intake of the dart will be in alignment with the edge of the rest of our fabric. That'll get a cleaner look when you sew your garment. Don't forget to record the measurement that you need. I believe the assignment sheet asks for you to record the measurement of the waist edge when the darts are folded. There's two ways you can go about that. You can either fold your darts and tape them again, and then measure your waist from center front over to the side seam. Or without them being folded, you can just measure these three sections and add them together. Don't include the dart intake and record that measurement.